Alright, well, you're live. So you just have to wait till people get on, and
Gotcha.
then I'll get on over here. You have 4 people on, but I haven't been able to get on yet here.
Alrighty.
I need water. Tim's watching.
What's
From
up, Tim?
Davenport.
What's up, Tyler? What's up, Ryan?
I was like rushing them. I was like, I have to go.
I looked at the clock and I was like, uh-oh.
We go like right now.
Just gonna give it a minute. Let some people get on here. Oh boy.
Of course, I thought I turned most notifications off. I went through and turned most of the notifications off for you, but. Alright.
If anybody's watched any other live videos, you may recognize this as Miller Time Fly's headquarters. Hanging out in scenic Braden Miller's fly tying dungeon. Oh boy.
Nor-vise is not.
Yeah, Keith, it does look familiar, doesn't it? Y'all can't see it. I'm jealous of this kid's hat collection. He's got hats all over his wall. I thought I had a whole lot of hats.
Don't be jealous.
This kid's got more hats on his wall than I own, and he's probably got 30 more in his closet that aren't on the wall.
He comes home from different events with like 4 or 5 new hats. I'm like, oh my god. Alright, well, you're at 48 people, so.
Alright.
You may see Braden pop through there.
Yeah, Braden may make an appearance through the door here in a minute. But we'll go ahead and get started, I guess. Going to talk about the fish and the fishery itself before I get into tying for them. Snakeheads. They are a lot of people's favorite fish to hate. And when they first got in the news and when they first made it to the country, I will agree. I mean, you had every reason to be worried about them. Nobody had any science on them. There was no data. I mean, these fish are from Thailand, Malaysia. They're from overseas, and most people know those countries don't do a whole lot of studying of their wildlife. So nobody really had any idea how big these fish got. Nobody really knew their diet. Nobody knew how they were gonna affect our ecosystems. And typically, when you introduce a new fish to an ecosystem, it tends to be worse, or it tends to be bad before it tends to be good. There he is. What's up? Braden making an appearance. But these fish have been here in the United States for about 20 years now. This actually is the 20th year. Ground zero for their introduction to the country is the Potomac River. It's where I do most of my fishing. Like I said, these fish have been here for 20 years, and they've gotten all this bad press, and in reality, nothing has happened. These fish have been here for 20 years, and through all of the shock boat studies, all of these studies that have been going on since these fish have been found in the ecosystem, there is not a single shred of scientific proof that these fish are hurting our ecosystems. Our studies are showing just about every species that they can study or that they can sample with these shock boats. Bass, crappie, sunfish, catfish, even a lot of the prey populations are actually better than they've ever been, or better than they've been in the past decade. And now that's no one's saying that's because of the snakeheads, but everyone is saying that's in spite of the snakeheads or despite the snakeheads. these fish, they're not just a predator. That's the thing. Everyone thinks these fish are just streamlined killing machines, but they're not only a predator, but they are a vital prey ecosystem or a vital prey.
Ooh, sorry.
Technical difficulties. They're a vital prey item in this ecosystem now. They're just yesterday, my dad and I were out snakehead fishing, and we saw one fry ball. It's a little early in the season for fry fish already, but there was a fish guarding her fry. Didn't see any fish eating the fry yesterday, but in the past I've seen gar, bass, sunfish, perch, crappie, bowfin, just about any fish you can name. When they see a fry ball of snakeheads, it's a death sentence. Those fry are done. The snakeheads, they try to defend their fry as best they can, but I've seen schools of 10 to 20 bass just decimate a hula hoop sized ball of fry, and I mean, you're talking 100,000 fry, and they're gone in 10 seconds. As fast as you see them, they're gone. People think snakeheads are known for the number one myth with these fish is that snakeheads eat all the bass. That is probably my favorite and least favorite saying ever. I see Braden laughing.
Yeah.
Snakeheads don't eat anything that they cannot fit in their mouth. They're not like a muskie or like any of the other Esox species where occasionally you'll see a muskie swimming around with a fish T-boned in his mouth. Snakeheads won't do that. They only eat what they can eat whole and choke down pretty much instantly. Now, if any of you follow me on Instagram, you're going to see a pretty cool picture tomorrow. My dad caught a giant yesterday, and I'll put it this way: a 35.5 inch, 36 inch snakehead. His mouth is not much bigger than a mason jar. I mean, you're talking a 35 inch fish. His mouth is barely about that big. They're not eating bass. They may eat them when they're small, but everything eats them when they're small. I mean, it's just another predator in the ecosystem. People call them invasive. I get that. By definition, yes, snakeheads are invasive. We get it. But if you fish for snakeheads, or northern snakeheads specifically, that's what we're talking about today, is the northern snakehead, not the bullseyes like they have in Florida. But if you fish for northern snakehead, anywhere that northern snakehead live, largemouth bass, blue catfish, flathead catfish, channel catfish, about half of our sunfish species, and one of the two species of crappie are all non-native. None of those fish are native to our ecosystem. So if you want to hate on the snakeheads because they're invasive, you need to think seriously about all of our native species. But touch real quickly on the flies, and then I'll get to tie in something. In terms of flies I throw for them, it's pretty much all bait fish patterns and anything that imitates a frog. That's their primary forage, is small bait fish and terrestrial items like frogs, and they actually eat a whole lot of large bugs too. But you can get as complicated or as simple as you want. I mean, game changer, popping frogs. I do really like throwing game changers for them, different changers and different patterns. They really do have a soft spot for bright colors, something like a yellow feather game changer. Braden and I's pattern, the cardiac arrest in bright yellow. They really do have a soft spot for yellow, but then also nice natural solid white frog. they really like to eat those too. But one of the easier flies, and one of the flies I've had the most success on, is one of these guys right here. Just a simple diving head rabbit strip. It's basically just a Foam Head Dalberg Diver, and that's what I'm gonna tie up. So go ahead and get started. Hook in the vise. We're doing a 2/0 Gamakatsu B10S stinger hook. It's one of my favorite hooks for these fish. It's when you use a B10S, the size of the wire about doubles in thickness when you go from a size 1 to a 1/0, and the 2/0 almost is identical in size to the 1/0. It's just a tiny bit longer. And for this fly, that little bit of extra length is nice. So any kind of heavy thread, color doesn't really matter. The fly is going to be covered up by, let me drop this hook down in the vise a little bit. All the threads can be covered up by the head, so it's not super important. Go ahead and dress the hook down to the bend. Don't have my scissors out. There we go. Now you want to use something to prevent the tail from fouling. So what I use is the same thing that I'm going to use for a weed guard. Well, actually, we'll tie in the weed guard first, but it's the same thing I'll use to prevent the tail from fouling. This is just a piece of regular 50-pound monofilament. If you like to use hard mono, like a lot of people do, Mason 20-pound, I believe, is what I use when I have the hard mono. So you can go ahead and start the mono on one side of the hook, whatever you prefer, whether it be the near or the far side. Just remember which side you started it on, because when we finish the fly, you're going to cross it over to the opposite side. So measure that out to where it's going to meet the eye. Give yourself a little bit of excess, maybe about 3/4 of an inch. Then go right back to right above the barb, and you're going to tie in a small loop of the same mono right in the same spot. And what that's going to do is this rabbit strip tail that's going to be tied in on top of this. Rabbit strip has a tendency to foul around the hook even with a weed guard. So you just put a little loop right here, and it really, really, really helps with that. Won't say it'll 100% prevent fouling, but it definitely helps. Go ahead and get that. Tie it down pretty nice and tight. Please hang in there.
It paused.
Hold on 1 second. I grab this. Alrighty.
I'm gonna kill that right.
Technical difficulties, but we're good.
5 people left.
Alright. So, that little loop of mono needs to just sit right on top of the hook. There we go. Now, right on top of that loop, this is just regular gold Flashabou. These fish definitely have a sweet spot for gold. Most places that you catch snakehead, the water is very tannic. And anywhere you have tannic water, most of your bait fish, when they flash trying to escape, it's really close in on my face now. I think when we got a phone call, it zoomed in on my face a little bit.
No, I zoomed in for you because I was told you can't see.
Oh, I got you. Never mind. We're good. But you take a clump of gold crystal flash. This is about 15 strands that I doubled up, so it ends up being about 30 strands. And just tie it in right on top of that loop of mono. All this is going to do is act as a little bit of flash for these fish when it hangs under the tail. A lot of times you'll get snakeheads that come up, they'll follow the fly. They're notorious for waking on the fly. They'll follow it all the way to the boat, or they'll follow it out of the pads or whatever structure they're in. They'll get right underneath of it and stare at it, and a little bit of flash helps, especially something that's soft. Slightest little bit of current in the water will make it move and seal the deal.
You had someone ask our snake damaging.
What?
So I'm very sure, are they snakehead damaging?
To answer the question, I didn't see who asked it, but are snakehead damaging? In the ecosystems in Virginia that have been studied, no. Just short answer, no. They've been here 20 years, and science has yet to be able to find a fish population that's been affected by them. Even their primary food source, the killifish, there's been studies on the killifish populations, and killifish their numbers are even up. So they're just another fish in the ecosystem. Mother Nature finds a way to balance everything out. I think people are keeping them in check with how many they keep, but other fish in the ecosystem are also keeping them in check. So we're going to take a piece of rabbit strip. This is actually a little bit thicker Magnum rabbit strip. This is the 1/4 inch. You can use the 1/8 inch if you want, but it just ends up being a little bit slimmer tail than I like. So this is the 1/4 inch and about a 2 inch piece. And I already might have seen me. I was trimming the tail to a point. That just gives it a little bit better taper. Go ahead and cut that off where we're going to tie it in. And we're going to tie it in right on top of that yellow flash or the gold flash. And just tie that down nice and tight. The nice thing about the rabbit strip is once you get that stuff locked in, it's not going anywhere. You really crease that leather around the hook. And you can put some glue on there if you want, but it's really, really not necessary. There we go. Clean that up a little bit.
What Austin's on from Green Top.
Right. Austin from Green Top's on. What's up, Austin? Now, next step. All you need is 2 schlappen feathers. This one, this diver we're tying is going to be in a bluegill color, so I like to blend just a natural olive and a yellow. So take 2 pretty large schlappen feathers and match them up. Depending on who you talk to, they'll tell you not to stroke the fibers back or just wrap them naturally. I always try to stroke the fibers down. It makes them a lot easier to tie in and just to manipulate when you get it onto the hook. So match them up, stroke them down, and then get you a nice tie-in point. Once you've separated them, go. Gonna clip those flush. We'll tie those in. Go, and just doesn't have to be a super pretty tie-in. Like I said, just as long as everything's tied in secure, that's all that matters. Because when we finish, we're going to end up sliding this head over a whole lot, and it's going to cover up any kind of mistakes or anything ugly that happens. So, going to move that thread forward. Now, since these are kind of married together, just stroke those fibers back. I tend to wrap these by hand. I do spin the vise to wrap these pretty often, but I tend to just kind of like to keep control and keep all these feathers stroked back. That way the fibers are all pointing in the correct direction. I don't want to trap any of these fibers. So I'm going to go ahead and just stroke them back with every wrap. Braden, if I hear you talking.
Nah.
Raiden's over here throwing shade on my fly, I think.
No, Henry said, "Sup, brother." I was just trying to relay that to you.
Oh, what's up, Henry? So we're going to wrap these schlappen feathers all the way into the base of the feathers. So just to cover most of the hook shank.
The things I do for you.
And one more wrap should do it. Oh, yeah. Okay. Go ahead and capture that. Like so. And just cut these guys off. Alright. So now is pretty much the only part of the fly where you kind of pretty it up a little bit. I didn't make a mark with my thread when I started, so I'll do that now. One good way you can do this when you start is you can take the head and kind of tie a loop of thread or start your thread in that point so you know where the head will cover the fly up. So what we're going to do, we're going to build a nice dubbing collar right in front of these feathers. As you can see, the back of these diving heads has a massive cavity that you've got to fill up. So the main purpose of this is add a little bit of density right around the head and smooth the taper out, but it's also just to kind of fill that head up. So what we're going to do, this is Bruiser blend dubbing. It's just the Bruiser blend. I think this is brown olive. It's the slightly darker olive color. They have 2 or 3 olives. This is the darkest olive. Gonna tie in. I mean, this is a healthy bunch. It's about a pencil and a half, I would say. So get it all evened up. Sit it right on top of the hook. Tie it in the center. Like so. And now we're not going to fold any of that back until we're ready to slide the head on. So we've got that there. That's going to be the top. Now, the belly, this is actually a blend of 2 colors of Bruiser blend. This is the Sunburst and the Canary colored Bruiser blend blended together. I really like the Sunburst because it's got a little bit of gold in there. If you haven't caught on to that theme. So, I'm going to go ahead and flip the fly. This is going to be the belly. Same thing, tie it in the exact same spot. Really nice and tight.
Your friend Henry is laughing. Probably at me.
Henry, don't come in here laughing. Alrighty.
I'll have Braden related.
So, got that all tied in. Now, if you want to pretty it up just a little bit more, this is not necessary, but I like the way it looks. Since we're tying this in bluegill color, why not give it some blue cheeks right on the sides now. You're going to turn the fly on the side and tie in. This is just regular, I think this is electric blue or fluorescent blue laser dub. Tie that guy in there. Flip it to the other side. And thought I had 2 pinches out, but I guess not. No.
Hey, ask Big Dave, say, does the room look familiar?
That's who?
Big Dave.
Big Dave, does the room look familiar?
He said, is Grant at your house?
We moved all of Braden's stuff to my house. But same thing, you line those, just for these cheeks, you align those fibers like you did with the Bruiser blend for the top and the bottom. And give it just a little accent of blue. Like so. Put the fly back in the vise, or put it back vertical. And now we're going to pull all of that material back. Like so. And kind of, as you pull it back, you force your thread through the front of that bottom collar, that Bruiser blend. And what it does is it just jumps it through all that material, and it actually helps lock it into place. And just because I want to, I'll take a little bit of fluorescent orange, just a little bit. And we're going to give it a orange throat. Snakeheads are not super friendly to bluegill. They are probably the #1 predator to their fry. Most people don't think of bluegill as meat eaters, but they certainly are. I think snakeheads, since they spawn throughout the summer, they don't necessarily all spawn at once, and they don't spawn 10 times a summer like people claim they do. They just sporadically spawn throughout the summer. Once the water temperature gets above 75, they spawn. So when bluegill are super active running around, the snakeheads are spawning, and I think snakeheads just always have a bad attitude towards bluegill. So
David Laundry, I apologize if I messed up his last name. He says, what thread are you using?
This is just regular 210 denier, just flat waxed. Any heavy thread will work. I do recommend using at least 210, or you could use any of the Vivus, like the power threads or anything. Just something you can really crank down on that rabbit in the back to keep it secured, and really crank down on this Weedguard to keep it secured. Just some kind of thread that you can put a whole lot of pressure on. I think Danville makes big fly thread. I use that sometimes as well. So now that we've put that collar on there, you can see it fills that gap up real nice. And now all we're going to do just dress the rest of that hook with thread just to give that the front of that head something to bite into.
Carl would like to know, have you ate snakehead before?
I have had snakehead before. It is very good. In Virginia, you do not have to kill the snakeheads you catch if you release them into the body of water that you caught them in. So in other words, if you want to catch one, take a picture of it and release it. It's perfectly legal. That's actually legal just about everywhere that they exist. No state can force you to kill snakeheads or kill anything. So, but I have eaten them. They're great to eat. I just really enjoy catching them. I like them to be there. So I'm usually releasing most of the ones I catch. All right. So got all that dubbing ready to go, and I believe I have material I need behind me. Sorry, folks. Hold on one sec. Now, in order to attach the head, there's plenty of glue on the market. I'm sure everybody's got their favorite, but I highly recommend Loctite gel. The gel gives you just a little bit longer working time. And trick with the gel is coat kind of the inside of the collar of the head, like so. I don't know if you can see that. You can kind of see it in there now. You coat that inside collar and then give your thread a decent little dollop of it, and maybe even a little bit right on the front of the dubbing. You just want to kind of maximize the amount of area that this head's going to bite into. And like I said, this is why you want to use the gel. It gives you that little bit longer working time, and it stays in place. As you can see, that little drip of glue on there, it's not going anywhere. Makes it a lot easier to work with. Now, probably my favorite feature of the Nor-vise right now, the fact that the fly is at perfectly vertical. It's straight up and down. You don't have to worry about it. It aids in putting this guy on, and with foam, you don't get a whole lot of working time once that glue sets. So get a good front view, make sure it's nice and flat. And a trick with these heads to make them dive and work a little better, as it's setting, push up on the bottom, and that will tilt the head at more of a downward angle, and it'll just help it dive a little better.
Shannon Messer said, what weight rod are you using for snakehead?
Typically I use an 8-weight. It's almost 99% of the time I use an 8-weight. I've never had any issues with an 8. It throws the flies you need to throw just fine. And yeah, these fish, they fight hard, but you're probably not going to run into one that you can't handle with an 8-weight. Well, let's say that. Yeah. Yeah. Yesterday was a dark day. We won't get into that though. So after you've got the head on, if you didn't do a weed guard, if you're fishing early season snakehead, what I call early season, so like late April through probably right now, the grass isn't up yet. You're fishing around lily pads, you're fishing around wood, you're fishing all the structure you're fishing you can see. You don't necessarily need a weed guard. You're going to put it in places and strip it to where you know you're not going to be grabbing onto anything. But from right about now all the way till the 1st of October, I strongly suggest a weed guard. Hydrilla, eelgrass, spatterdock, everything starts growing up, and you're fishing these flies through it. Now, I'm not talking down the edges. I'm talking you're throwing it in there, because these fish get in the grass, and you need to get where they are to get them to come out. So weed guard's going to help you a lot. So all we got left to do is attach this guy. It's just hanging down behind the fly like where we started. So what you're going to do, you're going to wedge your thread right in front of that diving head.
Say hey to Ed Hayes. And Tim said, what happened yesterday?
We lost a 15-pounder yesterday, Tim. Let's not talk about that.
Your dad got a good one.
Yeah, my dad did get a good one. He did, didn't he?
It wasn't we that lost him.
Yeah, got 2 shots at a 15-pounder, had her hooked 2 separate times, and she decided she didn't really want to get caught yesterday. Go figure. So once you get your thread started, like I said at the beginning, remember where you started your weed guard. I like to start it on one side of the hook and then finish it on the other. That way you know your weed guard is at some point crossing in front of the hook point. It makes a big difference when it comes to not only getting these fish hooked, but also keeping weeds off the hook point, because you know that the weed guard is protecting the hook point. So I started it on my near side, like that's typically how I always do it. So now I'm going to bring it to the far side. And just kind of hold it in place while you cinch it down with your thread. You get it where you want it.
Tim said save that big girl for him.
I know where she lives. She will definitely get another visit from my boat. Whether she wants to play again, that's a different story. So, trick with mono weed guards. It's a pretty old trick. I got taught this almost from day one. The way you want to attach this weed guard, a lot of people have trouble with it because they'll attach it and then when they're done, they'll pull it tight and then you'll have this massive weed guard or this massive bow that's not really protecting anything. So right now, where I've got it right now is about perfect. So what you do, or what I do, when you've got it where you want it, you take your scissors, good sharp pair of scissors, and you just kind of grab the mono with the scissors. Don't cut it, just grab it. And now you'll pull it ahead, or pull it up out of the way, like so. And I cut it about maybe 1/16 of an inch above the little score mark that I just put in it with my scissors. Now the reason I do that is because the way we attach this weed guard, if you wanted to, you could just pull it out right now. Even if I glued it, I don't care if you use the strongest glue on the planet, it's coming right out. So what you do, you watch that little score mark and you take a lighter and you just melt that mono down to that score mark, and then while it's still good and hot, mash it flat. It didn't work perfect that time. There we go. And mash it flat. Now what you've basically done, you've created this little nail head right there to where when you try to pull that mono out, you can still pull it out, but it takes a significant amount of force. For me, I've never had one of these weed guards pull out before the fly was done. I mean, the fly was not even usable anymore by the time the weed guard failed. So what I'm going to do, pull that back into place, like so. And then we'll go ahead and whip finish. It doesn't make for the prettiest head on the fly, but snakeheads don't care if it's pretty. It's more about presentation than it is about looks. Go ahead and whip finish, capturing on both sides of that little nail head we just made. Pull it tight. And that is it. The fly is essentially done. All I'm going to do, just one more little feature just to make it look good, is attach some eyes. Any eyes will do. This is a Rainey's large foam diver head. The large heads I've found, I think it's a 6mm. 6mm eye tends to be the best. And another feature with this Norvise, now that it not only can be perfectly vertical, but it can be flat on each side at the 90 degree angle. So you know you're putting the eyes right on the side of the fly. Once again, Loctite gel, put a dot there.
Brittany, what do you use for a leader? Oh, sorry, that was Brian Davenport.
Brian, for leader, you can. I typically use straight fluorocarbon. Even fishing topwater like this, I use fluoro. You can get a buy with 20-pound mono if you wanted, but all the topwater flies that I throw are pretty buoyant. I mean, they're big foam-headed flies, so that fluoro is not going to pull them under. And I don't use a very long leader. I use about a 6.5-foot leader. And yeah, straight 20. You can use 30-pound fluoro as well. I've never been bitten off by a snakehead. Knock on wood. This is not wood, but you get the point. I've never been bitten off by a snake, but I have been bitten off by bowfin. Bowfin have serrated teeth that actually interlock. I'm pretty convinced bowfin, if you were using cable, they would still find a way to bite through it. I've had them bite me off on as heavy as 40 pound before, so bowfin, if they take a fly deep enough, they can bite you off, just plain and simple. But snakeheads, they have kind of more of a sporadic tooth setup. They're not really in any specific order or area. But they're also pointed and they're rounded. So, I mean, they're just a lot less prone to biting you off. If you're specifically fishing somewhere that only has snakeheads and not necessarily as big of a bowfin population, then 20-pound fluoro will be just fine. So now, last thing to do is just kind of stroke some of this dubbing back. I like to pull it out of here. Actually, I can leave it.
He's doing that. This one can tell us difference.
Let's see. So yeah, as you see, when you tie in the dubbing in the center like that, you don't capture all of the material. That's another reason why we use such a big clump of it, is because not all of it's going to be captured super tightly. And you just kind of sit here for a second and you can keep pulling until you don't get any material back. And it just makes sure to do it on every side. If you have any that's really, really long, you can kind of trim it to shape. Like so. But essentially, that is a quick and easy snakehead fly that will get bit. This is the one I kind of showed in the video. This one, as you can see, she's been matted down a few times. I don't know if it'll show up on camera. This one's caught 5 or 6 fish. One thing I did a little different, I just gave it some gold fingernail polish under the head, just a little bit of extra flash is all. But yeah, I mean, it's a fish catcher. They're quick, they're easy, don't have a ton of materials. Just about anybody can tie it, and yeah, not a whole lot to it. Like I said, it's more about presentation and putting it in front of one than it is the actual pattern itself. Just put a little dot of liquid super glue up here by the Weedguard. Can't remember if I did or not.
Joseph'd like to know, does it work with any? Does any color work?
Any color I can imagine would work. I would say my next best color to this would be either white or black. Specifically black. When you're fishing topwater, solid black is never a bad idea. It silhouettes really well to the fish, and a lot of their food sources are just dark in general. A lot of the frogs they eat are really dark. They eat a lot of salamanders that are swimming around and stuff, so I don't think they necessarily think this is any one thing. I just think they think it's food. It's above their head. Snakeheads are designed to eat things that are above them. Their eyes are right on top of them, so they're used to seeing prey from below where the sun's shining on top of it. So I think 99% of what they eat looks black to them anyway. So yeah, if you wanted to tie this same fly in black, or I've done well on black with purple, where you do everything's black except for the dubbing. You do a black top with a purple belly. Black and purple has been really, really good to me as well. And do a purple flash instead of gold there, just to pretty it up and make it match.
David said, do you ever coat the head with UV cure glue? I
do not. When I'm tying this fly specifically, it's a numbers game. I'm just cranking them out, and like I said, this one's caught either 6 or 7 fish. I can't really remember, but it's got tooth marks. It still floats. It still fishes. I'll still fish this one. This one will probably get another fish or 2 in its lifetime before it gets retired. But yeah, those Rainey's heads, they're a little bit denser foam than most companies' heads that you buy. They can take a beating. There's another, it's a good advertisement for Loctite gel. This one's caught 6 fish at least, and those eyes are still stuck on there. So
somebody named Ed Hayes said, let's hear about the presentations.
All right, so presentation with snakehead will be, I would compare the feeding them to almost like musky fishing. You will see these fish a lot of times, and they are eager to chase. They love to chase flies. And a lot of your presentation is you legitimately need to feed that fish. I mean, when he gets underneath of it, he'll be sitting there staring at it. And you can really, really read the body language of a snakehead really well. Their pectoral fins will start really undulating. Their dorsal fin, that fin that runs all the way down their body, will be snaking along on their back. They let you know when they want to eat. If that fish is just kind of lazily following and his fins aren't doing anything and he's not really right on the fly, he's about 3-4 feet behind it, you need to make another cast and try and get it by him again because he's not interested right now. I mean, you need to do something to get him interested. But when you've got that snakehead that has followed this thing, my typical presentation is a steady retrieve. Strip, 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 and you benefit from the shape of this head. The head does kind of a gurgle as it goes down, and the fly is just hopping up and down and floating like this. When they get underneath of it, I don't do those hard strips to make it dive as much as I just kind of skitter it across the surface. Something about when that thing starts skittering across the surface, it's a death sentence. It's over. I mean, they'll just suck it right under. The big ones, they don't make a whole lot of racket. They'll follow it, and then just toilet flush it. It'll just look like a 5-gallon bucket got sucked under the water. But the little ones, they're the ones that put on a show when they eat on top water. I've had them shoot 3 feet out the water with the fly in their mouth. I've had them jump and land on the fly with their mouth open. I've had them do some crazy stuff. So I tell people, if you like fishing, you like snakehead fishing. You just don't know it yet. If you've never caught one, you need to try and catch one. They are addicting beyond description. I don't know any way to describe it. It's really bad. Any other comments? What are we up to? Let's see, what else can I talk about? What time are we at?
As long as you want.
It's 7:41. You have another pattern to tell?
That'll be good. Not one I could probably do in 20 minutes.
As long as they're on.
Trying to think about talking about the fish some more. I don't have anything out to tie that thing. I can get it out. Y'all want to see another pattern? I can tie another one. Take me 2 seconds to get the material out. It won't take me very long to tie. Let me see. Get this guy out the vise. I think I actually put the weed guard behind the screw.
Which one are you going to tie up here and Braden can get it? You can talk.
I'm going to tie that belly bumper bait fish.
Okay.
I was going to. Why do you know what that is?
He knows what it is.
Yep.
Do you have any problems with the eyes popping off?
As long as you use the right glue, as long as you use that Loctite gel, I haven't had any noticeable issues where a ton of them have popped on and off. I mean, eyes pop on and off for every species. I mean, I don't think it makes a huge difference, but the fly that I showed earlier, I mean, this one, they're attached with that Loctite glue, and that one's caught 6 or 7 fish. They're still hanging in there. And snakeheads have a ridiculous amount of jaw pressure. When they get a fly in their mouth, it is a serious work to get it out of their mouth sometimes. Luckily, if you plan on releasing them, they breathe air. You don't have to be super gentle with them. I mean, don't knock them around and stuff, but they can handle a little bit of surgery if you have to get to them. Yeah, and then should have all the dubbing out.
No, I don't know if you usually don't.
Yeah, let me see
Have
here.
you fished black water in Maryland?
I have fished black
Do
water.
they behave differently there?
The only thing that makes these fish really behave differently is the amount of pressure they get. Blackwater has a ton of snakeheads. I don't know anywhere that has more. It is definitely the densest population of snakeheads that I know of. And, yeah, I mean, they act the same. It's just, you need to be willing to go where people aren't going. These fish get pressured. They are getting very popular. A lot of people are fishing for them. A lot of bow fishermen are killing them. So they get used to pressure, and they're not super thrilled about it. Once you get to some unpressured fish, they get a whole lot easier to catch, which I think that's the case with just about all of them.
I believe
the hooks
this is your.
are in that bucket.
believe this is your mom, Debbie. She says your dad said show his catch that he caught yesterday.
Okay, I'll pull the phone out. I don't know how it's going to look.
I was trying to find
Okay,
a way
Mom.
that we could post a picture, but I couldn't.
Yeah.
Oh, Tim says he can post a picture of his dad on this feed.
Here we go. I can hold.
Yeah.
We'll show it this way, and then we'll make sure we post it.
Yeah. So there's the mega giant my dad got yesterday. That actually shows up pretty clear.
Holy moly.
So proud son moment. Dad's been kind of, I wouldn't say he's had bad luck with me snakehead fishing. He just hadn't seen a real big one in person, and I'll tell the story of that one real quick. That was a really cool fish, just in general. I've only been a part of maybe 2 doubles on the same, I would say not even in the same boat, but in the same area, fishing in the same creek or like right beside each other. I've only been a part of 2 doubles other than this one. And the creek that we were in yesterday, we have never seen the amount of gar in a creek as I did yesterday. We probably saw over 1,000 gar in a 5-hour period. It was just obnoxious. They're spawning, big schools, about 20 of them. And about 5 minutes before we caught that fish, my dad and I both kind of said, I'm wondering if these gar are tearing the water up so much that these snakeheads don't want to be around. You know, the water's getting real torn up. They were actually muddying the water up a bit. They're just causing a whole lot of racket. So we're just kind of wondering, and about, it wasn't even 5 minutes. It was probably 2 minutes after he said that. I pulled up in this little cove, and I said, oh, man, there's one, and fired to him. And while my frog was in the air, I said, Dad, 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 there's another one. And I didn't realize I had thrown at the male, the spawning pair. I threw at the male, who was about, they weren't spawning yet. They were not actively spawning. They were just kind of cruising, looking for their place to get down with it, I guess. And the male was in front, fired to him. The frog hit the water, and he just obliterated it. Just missile right to it, destroyed it. Set the hook, and like they always do, they jumps out the water, starts going ballistic. I mean, just tearing up the water for about a 5-6 foot circle. And I told my dad, I said, throw past my fish and bring the frog back. And he threw past my fish, and I didn't think that big one was going to eat. After all that commotion where my fish, granted, my fish was about 8 pounds. I mean, I was a good one. He throws the frog past my fish that's still going ballistic on the surface, and that 13-pound monster swam around my fish and goes and eats his frog. I've never seen one act like that. I mean, she almost was like, all right, honey, you handle that situation. I'm going to go handle this. And she just swam around my fish and just demolished his frog. And did not fight a whole lot. She tried to fight. She dove straight down, and she didn't realize she was only in 16 inches of water. She dove straight down, buried her head in the weeds, and we pulled right up on her. And when my dad pulled her head out of there, I got her with the boger grip, and she proceeded to fight when she got in the boat. But it was all over then. That's my dad has the new boat record for snakehead at the moment.
Oh, I know somebody who beat
So
that.
yeah.
Someone asked, well, shoot, I just lost it. Sorry. Popped up. Where do snakehead live? What type of water?
Typically anywhere in northern Virginia and north of Virginia, all the way up to Philadelphia. They've caught them in some of the backwater creeks and stuff in Philadelphia. They like any kind of tannic, I wouldn't say stagnant, but tannic, grassy, swampy environment. They're just about any creek off of the Potomac River. Once you get up above like the 301 bridge, that's kind of the general, what people use as the salt line. Pretty much everything above 301 is more fresh than salt.
You need to
So,
know where 301 is.
301 it's about the halfway point from Washington D.C. to the Chesapeake Bay.
Some of them are from Australia
true,
and things like that. So
Anyway, yeah, it's basically once you get about halfway up these tidal rivers in Virginia, you get past where the salt and freshwater line is, where it becomes more fresh than salt. Once you get up from there, any of these creeks, you get far enough back. If you see spatterdock, which a lot of people call them arrowhead pads, any of those lily pads, any kind of lily pad species or whatever, they're going to be there. especially in the Potomac, especially in Blackwater. Like I said, just about any river in Northern Virginia, they're going to be there. So
All right.
I'll start tying something else now. This one will, another pretty simple pattern. This is another bluegill pattern. This is a really good sight fishing pattern. If you see a snakehead, this is one you throw at them, especially if they're guarding fry. Because like I said, when they're on fry, they do not like bluegill at all. They're usually pretty upset with bluegill when they're on the fry balls. So just a pretty simple little bluegill one. This one's caught a fish too, I believe, and it's still holding up pretty good. But the head's got a little kink in it that I can't get out of it anymore, but you get the idea. Nice little bluegill presentation, and the cool thing is it rides hook up, which helps with the weedless factor. The trick with that is you need one of these. This is a Montana Fly Company belly bumper hook in the 2/0 size. This is the largest size it comes in. It's a pretty stout wire. I mean, it's stout enough to handle snakeheads. And this is a Kelly. I think Kelly Gallup was one of the designers of this hook with Montana Fly Company. So let's make sure we got this guy.
David asked, do they go for deer head divers and poppers? And Tim said you better like spinning deer hair because they will eat it and destroy it.
Yeah, if you like spinning deer hair, that's one of the reasons why I'm not tying a deer hair Dalberg diver is because they will demolish it. The benefit of deer hair, typically a lot of people say it's a softer presentation. It hits the water softer. That doesn't help you with snakeheads. I like tying spun deer hair stuff. It's fun to tie. It's kind of more of an art form for me than it is effective tying for the fish that I fish for. But once these foam diver heads, if you can get these foam diver heads and you like Dalbergs, that's a game changer. Perfect diving head shape every single time, and you just slide it right on. I mean, if I'm not instructing how to tie this fly and explaining every step, you can tie one of these in about 5 minutes. So that's good. Just making sure I got this fly nice and level in the vise. There we go. Alrighty. Tighten it up just a touch. So, belly bumper hook. It's actually just a newer version of a keel hook. They have a really, really cool design which keeps them riding hook point up all the time. And we'll get started. So, same thread. I'm not a huge believer in matching thread color or anything. It doesn't matter that much. I mean, if you wanted a thread that matches nice and pretty, you could use olive or yellow. But go ahead and start that. Then we're going to take some yellow Palmer Chennile. This is medium yellow Palmer Chennile. This is a cool material if you've never used it. I've used it for quite a while now. I mean, I use it on quite a bit of my bass patterns, just Palmer Chennile in general. One really cool thing you can use Palmer Chennile for is one of the most popular flies of all time, the bunny leech. If you want to tie a bunny leech, when you're wrapping the rabbit strip, tie this in with your rabbit strip. As you wrap, you'll get a bunny leech that has flash already built into it. And it ends up looking pretty sweet. So, I'm going to go ahead.
Hi from Argentina.
Hello from the other side of the pond. Well, no, we're the same side of the pond. You're south of the Gulf though. So I'm bad at geography. So we're gonna go ahead and start this.
Argentina, not Australia.
No, you gotta understand. I fished a
Same
long
thing.
time. I fished a long time yesterday,
Oh, for goodness
and I've been
sakes, it's
been working a lot of hours. I can be wrong with geography. Oh boy. Okay, so we're gonna capture that guy. Just cover the whole bottom of that belly bumper hook, and we'll cut that guy off, and just
I have to throw it around the arm
yeah.
twice.
So just me being picky, I'm gonna put a little orange throat on here. Same thing. This is orange medium Palmer Chennile. Bring this guy back.
Well, William Miller is watching you from the Ritz Garage.
Will, you can just come up here.
He is babysitting his other children.
Ah.
We cannot have them running around.
Alrighty, so this one can't really use the vise to Palmer on this section. It's kind of weird. I would just go ahead and cut about a 1.5 inch long piece. Just because of the shape of the hook, it's easier to hand Palmer it here. And it just gives it a little hot spot. Make it look like a radioactive bluegill. And wrap that guy up to right on top of that keel, like so. This thread back. Don't worry about real clean, pretty tie-ins. It doesn't matter. Y'all will find my fly tie-in is a lot more rough than a lot of people's, but whatever. I cover a lot of stuff up with thread. Thread is the mistake hider. So, next, this is another way to aid in weedlessness of this hook. A lot of people don't think is Bucktail as being an effective weed guard, but it is. We're going to go ahead and take, when you look at your Bucktail, up here is what I call the clouser section. This, from about the top third, is the better clouser hair. It's just a little bit softer, a little bit wispier. Down here, you're getting into more of like deer body hair, where it's kind of hollow and a little bit stiffer. That's what you want. You're not going to tie it in super tight. You don't want to flare it. You just want to get a decent, maybe about a pencil-sized clump.
While you're getting your clump, Stephen Anderson would like to know, what is your source for your belly bumper hook?
I believe I ordered them direct from Montana Fly Company. That's the company that I think makes the hook. And if you're going to order it from a shop, you can order it from Kelly Gallup's Slide In. That's Kelly is the designer, redesigner of the hook, I guess, or he worked with them to create the hook again. So yeah, order it from the Slide In out there in Montana. So nice little clump of bucktail. We're going to use this just to reach just past the bend in the hook, and it's just going to act as a makeshift weed guard. Once you get it measured out, a little long, shorten that up. Once you get it measured out, right there, go ahead and cut it. Don't need all that excess, like so. And we'll tie that in nice and on top. Like I said, I like to give it one good pull, and that will flare it a bit, but then wrap loosely behind that good pull, and it'll tame it back down. See how it stays nice and in line? Now, once again, cover all that up with thread. we don't need those ugly tie-ins. Just cover them up with thread. It'll be fine. All right. So now, next thing, if you watch the last fly, you'll see it in this one too. Gold.
All right, well, you have a lot more followers going right now, so why don't you let them know what you're tying for?
Okay. So, it's up to 340. That's pretty good. So, we are tying for snakeheads. Anybody that has just joined. The reason I said, if you notice from last fly, gold, they like gold. They like just about all their bait fish species that they eat when they scare or spook, when they just run away, the natural flash that they're going to see in that tannic water appears gold. So it's just a trigger for them. It's ingrained in their DNA. They see that color, and it just triggers them. They know that's prey trying to get away. So what I do, I lay a little bit of gold down this side. This is about 8 to 10 strands, and not that much. It's probably 8. So, and then we will line it up here, and it's always a little bit long, so even that up. Keep that stroked back. Tie that in. All right. Now, this is a material you can you don't have to use this. You could use yak hair. You could use craft fur or fly fur if you wanted. But I like to use this as Icelandic sheep. it's a pretty common material in fly tying now. It didn't used to be, but pretty much any shop seems to carry it now. So Icelandic sheep, it's just kind of like a little bit, I would almost compare it closest to fly fur or craft fur. It's just a little bit kind of kinkier, and it's super, super durable and naturally buoyant, so does a great job for this. Here we go.
Brandon Terry would like to know, have you ever had any luck with all flash fly, such as acrylics?
I have thrown Krelexes at them. I've never caught a fish on a strictly flash fly. I don't know. I just haven't had the best luck with flash in general. Like, I think it's more of an accent thing, and you need to just accent the fly that you're throwing with the right colors, gold, pearl, stuff like that. So the first color of Icelandic sheep that we're doing on this is yellow. I'll go ahead, tie that in right on top. Well, I measure it out first. Don't want it to be too long. That actually ends up being about perfect. You want it to reach just a little bit longer than that bucktail. I'll cut a tiny bit of it off. The nice thing about these belly bumper hooks, if you tied on the old keel hooks, they only have about half as long of a flat point at the front, where these have, I mean, it's doubled in length, so it makes it a lot easier to tie flies like this. So what I do kind of 2 loose wraps, and then take my finger and kind of roll it just a little bit. You don't want it under the hook, but you want it definitely on the sides, and then crank down on it.
Someone asked, what's the name of this fly?
This is just a variation of Kelly Gallup's belly bumper. I don't know what he calls it specifically, but it's just a bluegill version of the belly bumper. So don't crank that down. Clean that tie-in point up, like so. And pretty much everything you tie in on this fly, to an extent, it just aids in the weedlessness of the fly. I mean, you're draping the material over and around the hook point the whole time, and this Icelandic sheep is nice and just, it's got all that natural crimp to it, so it really, really helps just protect that hook. If anything tries to come in from the side, it's not going to roll over and grab any jump. So now for the next color, just to kind of mimic the back of the bluegill, we're not going to use quite as much as we did of the yellow, but this is just more Icelandic sheep. It's just an olive, and you'll get some pieces that are, you see, really, really straight like this. That's not what I like to use for this fly. I like to get down and get this stuff down here that's a little bit crimpier, and it just works better on the fly. Like so. Gonna get, I'd say, about half as much as what we used with the yellow. And just like you would do with bucktail if you were tying a clouser or a deceiver, go ahead and grab the tips and pull out, and that clump fell. That was too small of a clump in the first place. But you want to grab the tips and pull all of that under fur out, the really, really short stuff, because it adds bulk that you don't need. This stuff, the only bad thing about Icelandic sheep is it is naturally buoyant and water resistant, but just being the fact that it's just, there's a lot of stuff there. It holds water for 3 or 4 false casts. If you don't want to sit there trying to dry the fly out in the false casts, just go ahead and thin out how much under fur you got. You see, you get a good firm grip there, and you're just left with fibers that are all roughly the same length. And this clump can be slightly shorter. I want the yellow to be the longer portion of the fly. So we're gonna go ahead and lay that on top, tie it in pretty much the same place. Get it. This one, you don't want to roll it. You want to keep it right on top of the hook, because this is just to mimic the back of the bluegill. Then go ahead and clean all that up. Like so. Okay. Now, this is 100% optional. I think it looks better, but it's 100% optional. This is a barred olive saddle hackle from a bugger pack. And any two will do. They all are pretty much identical anyway. And try to just grab one instead of 3 at a time, like so. And yeah, these are just whiting bugger pack hackles. Nothing too overly fancy. What you want to do, I like to lay them right down the side just to kind of give it a cool barred lateral line. And you want to measure them out so that they're pretty much the same length as that yellow Icelandic sheet. Mark where that was and cut it slightly above that. And now a trick that I learned with these feathers, everybody hates tying in a feather by the stem because it tries to roll on you. Don't want it to roll. So what you do, take you some scissors that come, that flush up against each other, and mash that feather stem flat. Just get in there and really torque on it with your scissors and get a nice flat spot. I like to leave a little bit of the feather on there. One trick you can do is kind of stroke 3 or 4 fibers back and cut that little, I don't know if you can see it, but it's just a little stub right there. Same thing. Flatten it out and then lay it on its side. So it can be a little bit tricky just to get it to lay right where you want it, and it's not super important that it lays perfectly flat, but it just looks better. I usually do about 3 or 4 semi-loose wraps. I mean, there's some pressure on there. It's not going anywhere, but just enough pressure to hold it into place, and I'll explain why in just a second. So get your other feather out, mark it, cut it, cut your little stubs on the tie-in point, and then flatten it. Tell Tim to stop texting.
I'm sorry, I thought I turned off my notifications.
I'm sitting here looking at all the stuff Tim's saying. Alright, so you lay this thing on its side, same thing. You've already flattened that stem out. And once you've got it on the side, just 3 or 4 loose wraps, hold it in place, like so. After you've got those 3 or 4 loose wraps, the reason you do the loose wraps is you've put enough wraps on there to where now when you really crank on your thread, you're not going to spin that feather around anymore. You've cranked on it, you're only going to get maybe 2 or 3 of those wraps to tighten up, but that first wrap holding the feather in place is going to stay, so the feather's not going to roll on you. You hold everything back and then really, really start getting down in there and digging that thread into the previous wraps, like so. As you see, the feather stays perfectly flat right along the side. So I don't know if that's a trick anybody had seen before, but it's just one that I learned a long time ago. Who's making funny comments?
He said he's glad he didn't say anything bad about you.
Yeah, come on, Tim. Say something. Braden's crawling on the floor, everybody. All right. So now, we're going to basically do the same thing as we did for the collar behind this fly, for the head on this one. And I'm going to try to blend a couple dubbings to make the head pretty similar in color to that Icelandic sheep. That Icelandic sheep's a pretty light olive. So I've got some Lazer dub in olive and some Bruiser blend in brown olive. I think once you blend these two together, it'll be pretty close. Probably a little bit darker, but that's fine. So...
Oh, it's coming a little later across that. He says, "You're a beast, Grant, my hero." At least they didn't make you try to choke like they did me the last time I was doing this.
Alrighty. We got that set up nice. That should be enough dubbing to do. I'll probably need to add a little more in a minute, but take about half of this. We'll do our first tie-in. We're going to do it's probably going to be about 3 tie-ins of dubbing to stagger to make this head. I cannot stress enough, do not use too much dubbing on this head.
What you looking at?
You two need to be separated.
Braden knows that I get on him about using too much dubbing on some of his fly heads.
Oh,
I have
Tim
been
says,
turned.
Tim says you're not a beast. You're the best.
I'm a beast too, Tim, don't lie. Alright, so we're going to tie that guy in on the middle, like so, keeping it nice and right on top of the fly. Now, instead of blending dubbing for the belly, I'm going to just stagger them. So we're going to start with the darker color, which is Sunburst. Then we're going to go to Canary. Then we're going to go to Fluorescent Orange. And it's going to give you a nice natural kind of bluegill throat to the fly. So go to this Sunburst. And all these tie-ins are going to be the same amount of dubbing. So go ahead, get this stuff. Once again, the reason I like this Sunburst, I don't know if it shows up in the light. A little bit. It's got little strands of gold like Crystal Flash or really light Hollow Flash in there, and it looks really good. So put this guy upside down and do the exact same thing. Tie it in the center point. The reason you don't want to use too much dubbing on these heads is because you're doing 3 tie-ins of this dubbing, and they're really only moving forward about a 1/16 of an inch. So if you do 3 tie-ins that are super thick, the head's just going to be really bulbous, and it's going to get too big, and it's going to hold too much water. It's going to be hard to cast. So got that in place. Now, what I like to do so I don't have to feed my thread through the dubbing, you stroke the back, pull or stroke the top back, pull your thread up, and then stroke the bottom, and then put your thread in front, like so. You got a dubbing brush, like a brush. I'm gonna need it at the end. So now, that'll work. That clump of dubbing we had, I'm gonna add a little bit of dubbing to it. We got 2 more tie-ins on top and bottom. So here we go. Nice, same amount, probably just about as thick as a pencil, maybe a little bit less. Tie that guy in right on top. So, and you'll see this dubbing, just the way the material is, it's going to kind of naturally marry itself together and just kind of blend naturally. And you'll see. The blend, you can kind of do these out of order, just as long as you do the brightest orange first for the throat, it'll all blend nicely. The dubbing kind of just, it's all translucent, so once you blend it all together, it'll just all bleed and make a nice natural transition. So, go ahead and capture this guy. Doesn't want to lay where I want it to. There we go. Capture him on the bottom. Same thing as before. Pull that back. And then capture that. Okay, now we got one more tie-in. This head is probably going to need a little bit of trimming. Not much, it's just this Bruiser blend has a tendency. It's the main difference between Bruiser blend and Lazer dub is Bruiser blend's a little bit longer, and I find the fibers to be a little bit straighter. But for the most part, I mean, anything I'm using Bruiser blend for, if you have Lazer dub in a similar color and don't have Bruiser blend, you can use the Lazer dub. It's fine. Go. Tie that guy in right on top. Now, where's my orange? Get your fluorescent orange here, just to make a little throat. And this stuff is actually a little too much, like a little too bright. So I'm going to add it to kind of the more subdued sunburst color. And it will still be plenty bright, but instead of using all of that, just only that fluorescent orange, I'm going to just blend them together to make that kind of peachy orange that bluegill has for a throat, like so. There we go. And when you see me pulling them out and blending it like this, the reason for this is to keep the fibers all aligned, and it keeps them from getting too tangled up and all knotted and matted together. So, go. Right, get that guy on the bottom. Stroke this guy back. And then stroke this guy back. Okay, now one more tie-in, then we're going to glue the eyes and we'll be all good. And don't worry when you're tying this if it looks like the dubbing's all kind of just laying on each other, it's not blending. You'll see when you're done you can make it all blend together real nice. So this,
there you go.
We're
Sorry,
back.
I took a screenshot.
Gotcha.
I didn't know it did that on my phone.
all right.
I'm not, but so technical.
So a little bit of blue for the cheeks, just to give them the, it is a bluegill after all, so give them just a little bit more. And you don't need much for this at all. I mean, this is a very, very small tie-in because this stuff is bright. It's a fluorescent UV blue, and it glows in the water. Put that guy back. Alrighty. And now, once you get all that tied in,
Sit there.
gonna go ahead and whip finish.
You need to be like Tim. You need to whip it.
I've whip finished by hand since day one.
No, he said whip it so many times last week. I had the song in my head.
Whip it good. Oh god. Okay, so got all that straight. Now, before we attach the eyes, it's a really good idea with this dubbing and the Icelandic sheep. The cool thing about this fly is where the dubbing blends into that Icelandic sheep, it's actually almost identical material. The dubbing and everything, it'll all marry together really nice. So just give the fly a good brushing. So don't worry if it moves the fibers all around. They'll go back to where they're supposed to go as soon as the fly gets wet. So we'll give it a good brushing. You see we're pulling a lot of material out of there. When you tie in that midpoint, that's why you always use a little bit more than you probably really need, but you still don't want to overdo it. It'll thin itself out as you brush it. Getting there, still getting a good amount. Just check your brush every few seconds. When you stop getting a ton of it, then you've pretty much got it thinned out as much as you're going to get it. Just a little bit longer to go. Yep. Should be good. Now, just kind of situate your fly. Make sure everything looks the way you want it to look. Now she'll get a little haircut. Like I said, this Bruiser blend tends to be a little bit too long. So you just kind of spin it and just give it a nice little trim to shape it up. You know, bluegill, they're typically a lot fatter in the head and they taper down. They're a real broad head on them. So I like to leave it a real tall head, but you definitely want to get that taper. So, getting there. I think that's about right. Okay, so these are just 6mm eyes again. That's the size I'd say I use the most for about 90% of my flies. I use 6mm eyes, and these are just these are spawn fly fish eyes. I think these are actually the herring color. Bluegill typically have a yellow eye or kind of a yellow backdrop to their eye. What's up, 400 people? So what you want to do is put a little dot of that Loctite gel right behind where your thread stops. And then just smash that eye down. And this will do two things. It also, not only does it glue the eye right to the shank of the hook and really, really help with durability, but it's also pushing all that Loctite gel into that dubbing head. So it's locking all those tie-in points together. I mean, it's making that dubbing head as bulletproof as it's going to get. And flip it over.
Someone asked, have you ever considered Bruiser Blend Junior?
I have never used Bruiser Blend Junior. I don't mind trimming the dubbing, so I use more Bruiser Blend for how long it is. I mean, I use Bruiser Blend a lot purely because of how long it is. So I just have a ridiculous stock of Bruiser Blend dubbing, so I don't mind using it to trim. But if you're buying material specifically for this fly, Bruiser Blend dubbing, Bruiser Blend Junior would probably be just fine. So, lock that vise into that 90 degree, like so, and smash that eye down. There we go. So we got nice little bluegill head there. And if you want to just totally seal that head up, make it about as bulletproof as you can make, this is a Solares Bone Dry. Just a UV head cement, super, super thin. But I like to coat the very front of the eyes. It kind of gives it a structure coating to where, like, if you're bouncing this fly through stuff, it's not going to peel the eyes off from the front, which is how most eyes come off of flies anyway. So just go ahead, and I like to surround the thread and just coat the very front of those eyes. Watch your eyes, Casey.
Oh, for God's sake.
You're on that side of the light. I didn't.
Trust me, I learned my lesson.
I'm not trying to get yelled at over here. That's all I'm saying.
I learned my lesson with
so,
black light.
Spin that guy.
Stephen Shepard said, awesome.
Hey, Mom, which one is it? Is this one brighter or no?
Shut your mouth, Braden Miller.
All right. And done.
The lights that I purchased back.
So, that's another pretty simple one. It's a little bit more material intensive, but still an easy fly. Just like anything, the more of them you tie, the easier it gets. But nice natural little bluegill shape. The main thing is just keep that head nice and broad, nice and fat. When it gets wet, it'll all taper down and just almost perfectly imitates a bluegill. And if you want to make it sink a little deeper, where I started and wrapped the yellow Palmer Chennile, before you do anything, you could wrap about 5 or 6 wraps of lead. That would also help in keeling it. But one thing I've noticed with this fly is if you don't keel it, it actually has a tendency to kind of roll on its side and swim, and then it'll roll to the other side. The snakeheads seem to like that. They seem to, I guess it looks more like an injured bluegill. I get quite a few strikes when the fly just kind of dies onto its side as it's falling. And yeah, just another cool little bluegill fly that will get smoked. And don't think these are only for snakeheads. I've thrown these for bass. The bass love them. Anything that eats a bluegill will smoke this fly. And the nice thing about that belly bumper hook, the fact that it's riding hook point up, don't be afraid to drag it through trees or whatever. It'll come through just about everything.
Ed Hayes says his boat is hooked up. He is ready to head south.
Don't need a boat. I got a boat.
I got a garage you can stay in, Ed.
Yeah, they got a sweet little apartment above that garage.
Oh, he's been here.
So, anybody have any questions about the fish, about any of the flies, anything like that? That was the 2 I had planned to tie tonight. So, if anybody's got any questions, I am ready. What? I mean, I'm thirsty, if that's what you're implying. This is not a sponsored video.
Stephen Dow said, nice dimmer. Thank you. It is. One more time, please. Did you hear me?
Who makes Sunkist? Is Sunkist PepsiCo, or is it, who makes Sunkist?
There's no telling.
I don't know. PepsiCo or Coke? What's up?
Mine. Edward Allen says, good show, thanks. Norvise, what time of year is best?
That'd be good to talk about. With the northern snakeheads, which I fish for, the northern snakehead species, everywhere that they're located in the U.S., it's typically from mid-April is pushing it. Mid-April's a little early. At least for me, we've got a lot of stuff going on in April, so I don't usually fish for them until it gets good and warm. But I'd say prime time is probably May 15th all the way till October 1st. Is after October 1st, some of the best fishing of the year is that first week of October. But every year in Virginia and the Mid-Atlantic, we always get a mean nor'easter in October. It happens always every year. Once that nor'easter hits, it's over. It's always teetering right on that water temperature. 60 degrees. When the water gets above 60 degrees, you can catch them pretty consistently. But that nor'easter in October is usually what drops our water and makes it start holding less than 60. And after that, it's October. I got other stuff going on. I can fish for other stuff. But I've usually had my fill of them by October.
Give me 1 second. I'll check. I got it.
Anybody else got any questions?
Let's see.
I don't think I showed the actual package for the diver heads for that first fly. If you're looking at the first fly, they're just the regular Rainey's diver heads. On the 2/0 B10S, if you want to tie the larger version like I tied, you need the large. If you want to tie the smaller version like on a 1 or a size 2, don't tie it on 2, tie it on a 1. If you're going to tie it on a size 1 hook, you can use the medium diver heads. But a little bit of extra buoyancy is not a bad thing. Just having a little bit of extra flotation there when they suck it down and when it tries to float back up to get away from them, they'll come back and crush it. So
Somebody asked if you prefer Golf or Loon UV light.
In terms of the light, I would say the Loon. That Loon Infinity light, it's definitely, at least out of all the ones I've used quite a few, but it's the most powerful one I've used. That's the ticket with these UV lights, is you need it to cure deep and you need it to cure quick. I really prefer that Loon light.
It's on Amazon Prime too.
Oh yeah, it is on Amazon Prime.
Same price as Loon.
Yep. So if you want to get it in a couple days.
Are your scissors bejeweled?
I mean, they have a little fancy thing on them. I don't know.
Bedazzled.
These were straight
From
Pakistan.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know who you're talking about.
Handmade for me from Pakistan.
Only one made.
Only one made it across the border. So
Let's see. Well, everybody says great fly. They enjoyed it. Nice ties.
thank y'all for tuning in. Like I said, if y'all have any questions,
Grant will be checking this.
yeah, I can check it after we end the live feed. If y'all have any questions, you can post them on here and I can respond to them. Or if you want, you can send me a direct message on Facebook. That would work too. On Instagram, I'm on Instagram more often than I'm on Facebook. My Instagram is Grant Alvis _fly fanatic. But if you search Grant Alvis, it'll probably be one of the first ones. I don't think there's too many people with my name. I haven't looked, but Grant Alvis _fly fanatic is my Instagram. So
Tim said he has to go BS on that one pair made.
Right, yeah, he got his one.
he's not wrong. There were 2 in the package.
He says he has 24 pair with Nor-vise logo on them.
Oh.
Next week will be Shannon Messer taking over the Nor-vise Facebook Live.
Okay, so if y'all didn't hear that, Shannon Messer.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, next week is Shannon Messer. She'll be taking over the Nor-vise Live. Sorry, my fault.
And
He will be taking over the Nor-vise Live. So
let's see.
What's he gonna be doing?
Give me 1 second and I can tell you.
Casey's gonna tell me. Give me 1 second.
The trout.
Braden says something trout related.
He thinks something.
Fish related,
Don't you
by
love
the
that?
way. I mean,
It's fish related.
Braden's out of school. Don't mind him. His brain is not working anymore.
The child.
9th grade now.
I only have pictures of flies. I don't
Those
have
are trout flies.
Okay, there you go.
So Shannon Messer, next week we'll be tying some trout stuff. Looks like dry flies. So that'll be cool.
Take pictures.
I am terrible at tying dry flies, so I will probably watch.
Oh, you're Braden.
Any trout fly I'm terrible
You're
with.
bad.
Except
You're bad. If it's not like 4 inches, 5 inches, 6 inches long, Braden don't want parts of it.
Nah. Unless it's a changer, micro changer.
Oh, Shannon's on here. He said, happens all the time.
Sorry, Shannon, that's my fault.
There you go. There's my trout fly.
Oh, child, please. Brian said, thank you. Nice show. Nice ties. I think
The fly that got shared around a whole bunch, a lot of people actually sent me a message about it, if anybody wants to talk about that for a second. The fly that the original post about the fish, this is just a all yellow feather game changer with a Rainey's fish head slider head. If no one's ever used that head, highly, highly recommend it. It's actually a perfectly symmetrical bullet head, so the fly doesn't necessarily dive or do anything. When you strip it, it's going to come straight through the water and tail off to one side or tail off to another. It's the best slider head, in my opinion, that you can buy. If you reverse tie like a double barrel and turn it backwards, it'll slide, but it has a tendency to dive. This one, just being symmetrical, it seems to work really well. These slider head feather changers, they fish almost like a super fluke. As you twitch them and strip them, they get a whole lot of tail kick, but they just dart around in every direction. They're a really cool, erratic fishing fly. And the nice thing about the fish head sliders is they have little indentions for eyes, so you can put little eyes and then lock them in with UV, and they'll last forever, or at least until the fly is chewed up beyond recognition.
so. Do you have any more snakehead tips, tricks,
Um,
what not to do?
Let's think about what not to do. Do not trout set. If you trout set, you will not catch them. I won't say don't trout set. I do set with the rod a lot, but you need to give it a full arm strip when you set with the rod. You need to get their head up or at least pull the fish to you. Their mouth is solid bone. They're built just like a bowfin. If you're drilling that hook into bone, you need to hit them hard and hit them with everything you got. Most people, when it eats topwater, your natural instinct's going to be to set with the rod. And I'm going to apologize to you now, you're not going to catch that fish. Most of the time. About 50%, higher than that, probably 75% of the time, when that fish comes up and massacres a topwater fly, you're going to go, oh man, and set like that, and that snakehead's going to laugh at you, and he's going to go away. So don't do that. That's number one, do not do. Do not trout set.
Braden's back there shaking his head.
Yeah, Brayton does. You trout set the first one when you were fishing with me. Yeah. Brayton had a nice one.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, now we're gonna have story time for Tim. If Tim's listening, I said I didn't have the heart to tell him. I told Brayden.
I remember this.
I didn't have the heart to tell you, Tim. That first fish that you had when you fished with me last year, the one that shot its whole head out the water when it ate the fly. I mean, it was like your fourth cast right on that lily pad bank. You remember it. That fish was like 10 pounds. That fish was huge. I didn't have the heart to tell you because you were kind of mad when it happened. Luckily, you caught a nice one about 20 casts later.
Yeah.
But, that fish was like 10 pounds. I saw it swim under the boat and swim out into the channel, and you were like, how big was that one? I was like, it wasn't that big.
Cool. You just said cool, period.
That's not what he's referring to.
Oh, well.
I didn't have the heart to tell you, Tim, but we got you a decent one after that. A good one. Yours was a good fish.
Uh-huh.
But,
we're planning for them to come back down.
I was a little upset with that 10-pounder. I was trying to keep my composure watching that giant
He
swim
said,
off into the
I
channel.
remember it well.
Yeah, you asked how big it was. I told you it was like 5 or 6 pounds. It was not 5 or 6 pounds.
That's okay. He's going to make up for it. They're
But,
coming down in July.
Same
so
thing.
we
Yeah,
can all go out.
no trout set. Don't stop casting. You can, if you go out there and strictly try to sight fish them, you can, especially later in the season, July, August, September, when the hydrilla and all the aquatic grass is up. It really helps clear the water up, especially if you're fishing for them somewhere tidal. any of the main river color and stuff that comes in there, the grass will filter it before it gets way back into these creeks, and it clears the water up when you get into the shallows. And you'll see them laying on the grass, swimming along. It's fun to sight fish them, but you catch, in my opinion, you're going to catch more fish blind casting to structure and to targets. Don't stop casting. If you think for 5 seconds there could be a snakehead there, throw at it, because they'll surprise you. There'll be places they're not supposed to be. There's nowhere they're supposed to be versus not supposed to be. They definitely like soft cover more than hard cover, but just as soon as I say I don't catch snakehead off of trees, I'll catch one off a tree. So don't. The general rule of thumb, I'd say 80 to 90% of the time you're going to catch them off of grass or lily pads before you catch them off of wood. But if you're throwing, just keep casting. You can't get discouraged. You just got to keep throwing.
He says he almost knocked you off the platform later in the day.
Yeah, you did almost make me go swimming later in the day to net Braden's fish, but we got that fish in the net, so we're good.
Well, it was in September. It was hot. So
it was hot. It would have been fine.
Labor Day
Then that
weekend.
one shot through the net.
Yeah, then Braden's broke through his net, so that was good.
Speaking of net, any particular size net you recommend? And,
hand me my net, Braden.
Oh, I forgot. How about that just being right there?
A large net.
You might want to back it up some.
Back it up.
Let me back up a little bit here. Something fairly big. I don't know how wide that is. Maybe 18 inches wide.
I
I
can't
think
tell
so.
you.
I think that's a specs.
It's about 18 inches wide at the widest point in the hoop and a deep bag.
I think that's 24 inches or
Yeah,
something.
this is a 24-inch bag, so obviously perfectly vertical you could fit a 24-inch fish, but they're going to curl in the bag. The bag's nice and rubberized. Definitely have a rubberized bag if you can, and definitely a bag that can hold at least a 30-inch fish. These fish get up to 37, 38 inches long, and that's a super giant, but they get that big. And
40 plus.
yeah, 40 plus.
And
We'll talk about that.
That net is
And,
what? That's a 2020 big.
Yeah,
big
this is
trout net?
this is the catch cam nets. This is the 2020 big pig trout net, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
With the extra
handle-
wide the difference in the big pig and the pig net, it's a little bit wider head, and then I got the deeper bag, so
This
good to go.
one, it says it's 16 inches by 22 inches, the inside net loop.
16 inches by 22 inches.
With
So
a
yeah.
24-inch deep.
So this net, she just looked up the specs. It's 16 inches by 22 inches. That's not, it's not the only net you can use. Just make sure it's got at least at least 15 or so inches wide and a deep bag so they can get in there. I don't like handling them a ton on boga grips. Boga grips aren't the healthiest thing for fish in the world. But I do recommend having a boga grip in the boat or some kind of grip. Make sure, please, if there's one thing you take from this video, make sure whatever grip you're going to use on a snakehead or any fish for that matter, swivels. Boga grips, if you grab the grip, you can spin it. You can spin it inside the handle. Make sure your grips swivel. Snakeheads roll. They do crazy stuff. If you have to, I like to have the grips tied off. If they start going crazy, just throw them in the water with the grip on them, and they'll swim around. They're not coming off the grip. But if the grip can swivel, you're not going to damage their jaw. You're not going to hurt the fish. They can do whatever they want. You can just it's the safest way to handle them for you and for the fish. You're not going to drop them in the boat and let them get all beat up. Just make sure you have a grip that swivels. The metal grips like bogas and those are vastly, vastly superior to the plastic ones just because they're thinner. And snakeheads, I said it earlier in the video, they have a obnoxious amount of jaw pressure. When they close their jaw, they won't open. It's their natural instinct. When you start playing with them, you can sometimes hear them. They'll just close down so hard. Their teeth actually clack together. And you can't get them to open. Sometimes they'll sit there and go clack, 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 clack. Like they won't open. If you get a boga in there, you can kind of twist it and they'll open their mouth once you finally get it open. But jaw spreaders do not work on snakeheads. They just don't. There's nowhere to really lock them in. It's just a smooth bone top and bottom. So, yeah, skip the jaw spreaders, but have some grips in the boat just to make fly extraction and fish handling a little bit easier on you and the fish.
They want to see the inside of one of those snakehead mouth. Braden has it on his Facebook
I think
page.
I got one. Hold on. I might have a picture of the inside of a snakehead's mouth.
It's not pretty.
It's beautiful. What are you talking about?
The last thing anything sees.
It's under, I know there's one on Braden's.
Here we go. The face only a mother could love. Inside of a snakehead mouth. That's a frog, a gear fishing bait, but that's a frog saying peekaboo because he almost got swallowed.
Speaking of conventional fishing, now, some people are all only fly fishing. What is your opinion on fishing for snakehead both ways?
I fish for them both ways. Especially if I'm going to a new creek that I've never been to before. You can cover a lot more water quicker with a bait casting rod and spinning rod. I will say I think sight casting to fish with a fly rod can be easier, just because these flies, when you're not moving them, the fly is still sitting there. All this soft material, it's just sitting there breathing, and just it's a lot more natural. You can get a whole lot more bites on the paws with a fly than you can with spinning and bait casting gear. What I like to do typically is locate the fish with a bait casting rod a lot of times. You just, like I said, it's more effective, more efficient. You can cover the water quicker. And once you've located them and found a good area that's got a lot of fish, then start fly fishing for them. And it's definitely a tough game if you go at it strictly from fly fishing, because some days I'll say it, some days they don't want to eat a fly. They want something really, really obnoxious, really, really loud, really just pushes a lot of water, makes a lot of racket, and that's really hard for us to imitate on a fly unless you're double hand stripping a big popper head or something like that, and it can wear you out pretty quick trying to fish like that with a fly rod.
We'll give any other questions? We'll give it another couple minutes.
Yep, give it a couple more minutes. Any questions, ask them now.
Braden, any questions? Anything you want to add?
Am I allowed on the boat?
Yes, Braden is allowed on the boat. As long as he doesn't trout set. If he trout sets, he's not allowed on the boat.
I'll keep it under my arm.
Do you want to say guide? Anything? I don't really have time these days right now.
If anyone that doesn't know me, I'm a UPS driver full time, and coronavirus situation has not been fun for us. 60 plus hour weeks and doing everything we can to stay afloat. So it's been pretty much fun fishing for me only this year, which I don't mind at all. I mean, it's been a whole lot of fun, but makes me appreciate that time out on the water even more, just knowing that you're gonna be working 60 to 70 hours every week delivering stuff. Can't complain. A lot of people aren't as lucky as I am, so I'm definitely not complaining. It's been a serious jump in our package volume. So, all
right. Well, I don't have anything over here, and I'm on the Nor-vise, but there's a 20 second delay.
All right, we'll give it just a few more seconds.
Tim's texting. Listen. Do you want to explain why you like frog over something else? Anything?
Yeah, I can talk about that. Just one extra thing. If I'm going to fish something that imitates like a terrestrial thing, a lot of people, I've seen people catch them on mouse flies. I've seen people catch them on flies that actually look like floating lizards and stuff. I pretty much prefer the frog profile just because of where I'm fishing them. I'm fishing them up in the lily pads. I'm fishing them right next to the bank. I think they come in contact with way more frogs than they do anything else in terms of the terrestrial side of their diet. From people I know that eat them a lot, frogs, lizards, snakes, killifish is the main thing, but bluegill, small crappie, you name it. I mean, they eat just about everything that can fit in their mouth, but the That's the key. It's whatever can fit in their mouth. That's why I was talking about at the beginning of the video, that whole they eat all the bass, that myth. Once a bass gets to be about 10 inches long, 12 inches long, he's not on the menu anymore. I mean, he's too thick. Like that giant snakehead that my dad caught yesterday, that fish's mouth's only that big. I mean, they don't eat stuff and carry it around. They eat what they can eat whole. That's why they eat a ton of stuff like frogs and bluegill and things that size. That's why most of if I'm throwing a game changer for them, that's about as big as I get, maybe about 5 inches maximum. Their primary food source is about 5 inches or less. And the thing is, those killifish, that's their main food source. I've talked to guys who've eaten them, cut the stomach, and found 200, 300 killifish in one fish, and killifish are about that big. I mean, 2 inches long. A big one's about, 3.5, 4 inches. So, a lot of people ask me why I don't tie flies to imitate killifish. Because it's kind of a fruitless effort. I try to imitate the forage, but you also don't want to imitate the forage exactly, because then they're going to have to just feed through it. You'll be up against a lily pad bank and can't even count the number of killifish that are sitting in those lily pads. I like to throw something just a little bit different, a little bulkier, but still something that they're going to eat. That's why I throw these bluegill flies. So I usually skip the killifish flies and just go straight for bluegill and shad imitations.
Okay, well,
All right.
if I posted, you'll go through. You'll be checking throughout the week.
Yeah, so I'll be...
can direct message you if they have a question.
Yeah, if y'all have any direct questions for me or anything, like I said, I'll come back and scroll through this video and look at stuff throughout the week. I can answer it. You can send me a direct message or message me on Instagram, Grant Alvis _fly fanatic. Instagram is probably the best way to get in touch with me.
But he does check Facebook.
I do check Facebook as well. Don't worry, I check Facebook as well. But yeah, if you have an Instagram, give me a follow. I'd appreciate it. Appreciate everybody tuning in.
All right. Oh, this will be up on the YouTube page, the Norvise YouTube page, by Wednesday.
This will be up on the Norvise YouTube page by Wednesday.
Yep, and that's it.
All right. Thanks again for everybody tuning in.